Welcome everyone to this chess video. We're actually going to go through a few different games, but only at some critical moments. So first let me give a little bit of context here. So I've been trying to reach 2100 rapidchess.com for a while now, and I came very close. I got a new personal best, but unfortunately this is not a celebration video because I was a few points short and then my rating crashed. Now it didn't happen all at once, it wasn't like an immediate tilt when it's late at night. Been through those moments before as well. If that's happened to you, you can check out my stop loss system video or my video on how to cure tilt. I'll put both those links in the video description. So very close to 2100. In that same sitting, I actually dropped a little bit below 2050. And then the next sitting, when I came back the next day, I continued to play, and instead of going up, it actually went up and down a bit and then dropped continuously down, and I dropped below 2000. And if that wasn't bad enough, then the third day that I played chess, it actually went down as low as the 1960s. Now from here on out is what I'm going to show, whereas that same sitting where I went down to the 1960s without quitting, I continued to play. And no, I didn't keep dropping. I actually started going up and down, but continuing a little bit more up, and determined to get back over 2000, I continued to play, and eventually ended up playing 17 rapid games in a row, one sitting, which is much more than most people play. You can see the very bottom is the very first game I played. It was actually a loss, and then it was a draw, which I was losing in that game too. I had it won, I blew it, and then I actually salvaged a draw, but objectively I was lost. And then we can see I have 2 more wins, a few more losses, and I'll just kind of scroll up briefly, where you can see I'm still trying to recover, but it took me quite a while to get back up. Now let's get to look at some of these examples here. So I thought for this video, rather than start at the very beginning and go over an entire game, let's just jump to the more critical moment. Let's just show kind of where the game really shifted. And so all these positions be pretty close to equal for the most part, and kind of show really where I went wrong or what I did right. In this case, it is a tricky rook endgame, as they are known for. I am up a pawn, and so of course I'm trying to win. Now on the last move, my opponent was in check, and so they had to move their king somewhere. They chose g2, the only square that defends their pawn. And objectively, this is still about equal, even though black is up material. So now, what would you play in this position? You can even pause the video and see if you can come up with a better move than what I played in the game. Now, I actually gave this moment a little bit of thought because I knew that was the critical moment, but I still chose the wrong move. It was very tempting to continue to push your pass pawn, and I ended up playing pawn to a4. Instead of that, I should have realized this pawn on h5 is extremely dangerous, because if they're not going to let me capture h3, as they definitely won't, then I'll have a lot of trouble trying to stop this pawn and eventually stop it from promoting. So the biggest problem here is, how can I actually stop this pawn? Now the most simple and straightforward way to do that is to just simply play king to h8 and try and rush your king over there to defend. It might go something like king to e8, h6, continue to bring the king over to f8, and they can give a check and I'll come up, but eventually I am barely going to reach this in time. If they try and move their rook somewhere, then I'll be able to stop this pawn. And no, I should not be able to take this rook because that'll put me a little bit too far, and then I'm not able to stop this from queening. Now there's actually another way that I can actually stop their passed h-pawn. It's the interesting idea of playing pawn to f4. And the point of f4 is that I can actually play my rook here. And so if this rook ever moves, say, behind my pawn, I can eventually sweep this rook down and then catch the h-pawn. If the h-pawn pushes to h6, I can go rook to g6. They move the pawn and I can continue to block from behind. Or if they anticipate my rook coming to g3, rook to g7. But then I can instead play rook to e3, attacking this pawn, and I'll still get behind just in time. Instead of this, I played the very natural a4, which is a mistake. And so best for them was to play h6, and I'm actually not in time to catch their pawn. And so eventually I got checkmated in that game. But now let's go to the next example and see where I could have made an improvement or what I did right. In this case, I got lucky and I identified something correctly, which was they just now played pawn to a3. And as you can tell by the engine here, it doesn't like a3. In the game, I immediately recognized this was a mistake as well. Of course, they're trying to add more support to b4, but the problem is I really want my knight to get to this nice outpost. And from there, I'm attacking this weak pawn. Now, this pawn is actually kind of difficult to defend, and I don't have to access it from only this square. I can also take a different route. And so that's where I came up with this idea in the game. I can actually go knight to a7. It's a very straightforward idea that after they move, I can go to b5, and if they're forced to defend something like queen b2, already their pieces are getting really passive to defense. Which of course is a net gain for me because my pieces are worth much less than those pieces that I'm tying down. In the real game, they went queen to d3, And so I'll just breeze through the moves, so basically I was able to win the A pawn, get things traded off, and then just start playing against this backward C pawn. I maintained my slight advantage, and their pieces were just too defensive, and I was eventually able to break through. As you can see, there's just way too much pressure with the tripled pieces on this backwards pawn. They were forced to defend, just real textbook case of a lot of pins. And after they moved here, I'll just threaten to win this pawn as well, so they ended up resigning. But of course, the grind continues, and so let's go on to the next example here. Once again, I fall on the losing end of this one. I'm in an endgame where I'm actually slightly better as black, but I missed the opportunity here that really would have clinched the game in my favor. See if you can pause the video and find the absolute best move according to the engine. So there's several good moves here. Of course, I could play bishop to e1, attacking this pawn. I could even play a move like bishop d4, just a waiting move, kind of helps restrict this knight. But the top engine move here by far is actually bishop to b2. And you're just daring this knight to take the bishop, and it obviously can't. Because if it takes, then we ended up pushing. And wherever they go, we push past, and they actually don't have time to stop this from becoming a queen. If they don't take the bishop, we're just simply threatening to push the pawn. And then they're going to have to give up their knight, and then we've just simply won material, and the endgame is much easier from here. But, winning endgame, did not find the best move. Instead, I tried to get around and play king to f8, recognizing they were going to probably take here soon. Of course, not now because the bishop, but soon. Or at the very least, sneak around here and then win this pawn. Didn't want the h-pawn being passed. And so king f8 looked very natural, but it gives up this pawn. And so does it look like I'm in time? I can play a3. How are they stopping this? It doesn't look like they can come back in time because I'm a little bit ahead. But no, they do have a holding resource. They can play this check first. And if I play king g7 following through, I'm actually still fine. I'm equal, it's not great, but I'm holding. But unfortunately, with the lower time, I ended up playing the losing move, king to e8. And now their b pawn is just way too strong. They push here, I try and chase it down, and I'm just barely too slow. I go here in case they pre-move this move and lose the new queen. But they don't fall for that. They remove the defender first. And then they play this check so they can play this knight just to get in time to stop my pawn. And so I ended up playing to checkmate and of course losing this one in the endgame as well. So there really were not that many differences. I mean, a few mistakes here or there, a slight inaccuracy or two, and that can sometimes be the difference between winning or losing. Now this game especially hurt because I was already kind of dropping, and this player's a bit lower rated, so of course I lose a lot more rating if I lose this game. But that doesn't stop me from being creative and thinking that despite rating, maybe I can come up with a cool idea that could win the game, even if it's a little more risky. But no, forget the ratings, I'm trying to play objectively best, and I thought I had a really creative idea here. Now simple, of course, I could capture g4, allow this trade, or I can also trade rooks. The computer also says that is good, as I can get this other rook to the c file as well. But the really cool idea, I thought, is it a brilliancy? Rook to c7? Unfortunately, no. Computer disagrees, calls it a mistake. My idea was after they trade and I take back, I'm hitting this backwards pawn. And it looks like I'm making progress on the queen side, right? I mean, long term I can play moves like this, add a lot more pressure. And if they're stuck passively defending after something like queen e7, this has to be good for me, right? Well, unfortunately, no. They can counterattack. They play queen g6. And I still didn't sense the danger here. I thought my king was safe enough. I played king h1, anticipating the open file, and maybe my king can kind of hide in the corner. But it is not safe enough, because after we trade here, bishop to h3, and already you can see there's massive danger against my king. Already they're even threatening checkmate. So I found the only move that's really sort of holding for a little bit, which is knight to g1. Now defending against the checkmate threat, even if it's objectively still worse. Now by no means was this perfect from here, but I was not able to hold this position, trying to trade off the attacker, but queen h6 refuses the trade, and my king is just way too stuck. They bring more pieces to the party, I have to kind of move aside, otherwise this check would have been deadly. But after controlling the open file, this check is still going to come anyway. It doesn't even matter if I take, and then try and defend the best I can. There's just simply too many pieces around my king. So after I lost that game, now we come to this one, which is the one that barely pushed me back over 2000 again. But it certainly was not from this position, because I got into kind of a little bit of trouble. Their knight looks pretty aggressive, and so I played a natural move to kick it back, which is a6, and indeed that is a good move. But now they counterattack instead, and I still think this is fine, and so I decide to take the knight. They take back, and objectively it is still equal, But now here's where things go a little bit wrong. The engine prefers improving moves like bringing this knight to b6 and then probably c4, or relocating this knight back to b8, going to a6, and then putting a little bit more pressure on the b4 pawn. Instead of that, I thought I could win this pawn right away, but the problem now is they can play either rook to a5 or rook a7, but became much worse when instead I ended up castling. They were able to infiltrate, and then I played rook to c2 check, trying to attack. They block, because of course they don't want to drop their pawn, but now I just had to accept that this was a drawing position, and I have to bring my rook back and defend this pawn. Really sad looking, but objectively that's what I really had to do here. I'm up material, and so I thought, what's wrong with trading? That should probably be fine, but trading here is a blunder, because bishop d2, now they're hitting my knight, and I don't really have a good way to hold this pawn. Probably should bring the knight back, so I do, but now that they take here, they're attacking this pawn, and they're also attacking my knight. So I went from +1 in material to equal, and now probably about to lose this pawn as well. Of course, I save my knight, I lose the pawn, and white already has a little bit of an advantage. Now I'll fast forward several moves here into the endgame, and white is still maintaining their slight advantage. This rook putting good pressure on this pawn, and so I'm going to try and defend this. I bring my rook back to h6, and now actually best for them was either give this check now, or start pushing the f-pawn, and doesn't matter if you take here, this pawn is going to try and promote if possible. But slightly too slow is the natural idea of just simply pushing your pass pawn. And so of course the b pawn looks pretty good, my king is far away and cut off, so they tried pawn to b4, not giving up the entire advantage, but a large part of it. Because now I can play rook back to h3, attacking their bishop, and so they choose to defend the bishop. But now I find the sneaky move, which really gives me the best chances here. Now objectively best in this position is actually rook to c3, but instead of thinking objectively, see if you can find the sneaky idea. You can even pause the video and see what move I came up with. So if you're slightly worse as I was in this endgame, the sneaky idea is to play knight to d2. And so you're hoping they miss the move, and so when they play something, as they did in the game, they miss that this is actually checkmate, because I'm attacking their king, my rook is cutting off the rest, my pawn controls the other squares, and this square that's their only escape square is also controlled by the knight. Now knowing about this checkmate pattern, if they saw that this was actually a threat, attacking here and the escape square, then the move that's actually winning for them is to escape with their king right away. King to c5, and they're slightly better. I can give a check now, but now the king comes here, they're threatening to win this pawn, and eventually white should win this endgame. Now I know this wasn't the most dramatic, there weren't some sparkling attacks, there weren't some crazy defenses, but I think this gives a really good picture of what a lot of my chess sessions are like, where I play a lot of games, a lot of them I win, a lot of them I lose, but a lot of the time, both players will play pretty well for the most part. We'll just make one little error, or maybe have a wrong idea, and that's just simply enough to cost me the game. Now usually I don't play as many as 17 games in a row. I'd say most sessions I only play maybe half a dozen or so, but it really depends more on my schedule than anything else, and I used to play many more in the past. So assuming that you're not tilted, maybe you follow my stop loss system or something like that, then you really shouldn't fear variance. Everyone is going to go up and down, it's very natural. Even though I lost like 150 points in like 3 days with a huge swing there, I didn't lose any sleep over it. It's just a normal fluctuation of chess. And if you're able to keep the emphasis on learning and improving, that's going to help you much more in the long term. Now maybe most people aren't able to handle that many swings. If that's the case, then play fewer games. Keep in mind that playing a lot of games is important, and expose yourself to more patterns. So as long as you're not tilted, playing a lot of games can be really useful. Now of course you have to analyze all these games, you can't just play over and over and make the same mistakes. If you're constantly trying to learn, then long term this should help you improve. Of course I do many other things to try and work on my game as well, but maybe that'd be something for other chess videos. For this one I kind of wanted to give a little bit of an idea of what a lot of my games are kind of like. And hopefully I can keep going up, maybe not just 2000, but eventually get back up near 2100, and then finally make that final push. Thanks for following me along on this journey, everyone. I'll see you in the next chess video.